Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Roll to Hit. Get your pencils out, folks, because in this week's episode of the D&D Players Academy, we're going to be describing your character. We're going to be looking at things like background, alignment, flaws, ideals, bonds. So that means we'll be doing a lot of writing. I'll show you where these descriptions populate the player character sheet. We're getting really close. Let's get to it. Characters are defined by much more than their race and class. They are individuals with their own stories, interests, connections, and capabilities beyond those that class and race define. This chapter expounds on the details that distinguish characters from one another, including the basics of name and physical description, the rules of backgrounds and languages, and the finer points of personality and alignment. That's right, folks. I'm in the Player's Handbook. There is a whole chapter, Chapter 4, on personality and backgrounds. I will stop reading it to you. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but know that as we're filling out the player character sheet, you're going to want to spend some time in this chapter, Chapter 4, just to kind of figure out who this player character is. And then I'm going to hop from here over into Zoom so that we can take a look at the player character sheet as we're kind of going through some of the things in this chapter so that you can start to see how do you translate what's in here over to there. Almost done filling out the sheet, so let's get to it. All right, here we are in the Zoom room, and I'm going to start sharing my screen so you can see here. First thing I'm going to share is a character sheet. So you all can get a sense of what it is that we're talking about here when we're filling the rest of this character sheet out. And so I'm going to start pointing here. I'm going to use my little pointer so you can see better. First thing we're going to look at here is the character name. Seems pretty obvious, right? You can come up with any character name you want. One of my favorite player characters in any campaign I've ever been in. My son played a wizard named Tim McBiddles. McBiddles has gone down in history. He's a legend now. So yeah, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to just point here to some sources for names if you're having a hard time, if you got writer's block on coming up with a character name. If we look here at Xanathar's Guide in the back in the Appendix B has a ton of random tables for generating character names depending on the race of a character that you're playing. So here's Dragonborn names, here's elves, dwarves, halflings, half-orcs, gnomes, etc. So there's one resource. And another one, let me jump here to this Fantasy Name Generator's website. Fantastic for kind of just taking a look at fantasy and folklore names, look at all those names that you can choose from. So have fun with that. Pick a name that you're going to enjoy playing. That's the bottom line there. So as we're moving across, we've already talked about class. That's in an earlier video. We've already talked about race, and that's in an earlier video. So go back and visit those if you have questions. What I really want to point you to here is background. And then whatever you select here on background is going to cascade down to these personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. So this whole thing here will spill down from what you select as a background. So going back to the Player's Handbook here, I'm going to show you Chapter 4, Personalities and Traits again. And if you go to the beginning of the book, when you're just building your first player character, there's something in every class called a quick build. And in the quick build, it'll say, hey, if you're playing a rogue, select the criminal background. Or if you're playing a cleric, select the acolyte background. And that's good advice, but it's just advice. Take it, leave it, work with your dungeon master to figure out. Maybe you want to be a cleric with a criminal background. Maybe you want to be a rogue with an acolyte background. And it's up to you guys to decide. So that's all there. But the background's going back to Chapter 4 here. And I'll show you what I'm talking about, how selecting the background cascades down through these areas of the player character sheet. So I'm showing the acolyte here. And if I pick that, I don't know, let me see if you can just zoom in real quick and maybe I'll put a picture, but there's a whole bunch of random tables here on the side for personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. And you can just roll a D8 for your personality trait, and then you can roll D6s on those random tables for each of those ideals, bonds, or flaws. And you can just pick one and continue to fill out your player character sheet that way. That's what I mentioned earlier. There's going to be a lot of writing. You can imagine that. Let's scroll back up to the top. So if you pick your background, you've got this whole side of your player character sheet almost completely filled out. Alignment. What's that all about? So alignment is in the same chapter, and I'll put a matrix up here that kind of talks through what the alignments are, but maybe I should just read it so that you can get a sense of what that means. A typical creature in the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons has an alignment, which broadly describes its moral and personal attitudes. Have you ever heard of the terms chaotic good, or chaotic evil, or lawful evil, or lawful good? That's what they're talking about. Some tables have rules. We're one of them, that we don't like our player characters to be playing on the evil side of that alignment, just because it can get uncomfortable sometimes if you get somebody who's really invested in playing to their alignment. Are you playing against the party? Are you a rogue that's stealing from your fellow player characters? Some people might like that kind of game. Our table does not. I've also heard, I haven't watched, but I know that I think Joe Manganiello had an entire campaign that a prerequisite of the player characters was to play an evil alignment. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to look that up, but I want to say that that's there. And then WebDM has a video that those guys did, Jim and Pruitt, maybe a few months ago, on just chucking the whole thing. So chucking the whole alignment conversation. It's there, again, that's all stuff you work with your Dungeon Master on as you're building your player character for the campaign that you're getting ready to play. So we've got class, race, background, alignment, your name, easiest part of the player character sheet. XP is going to be 0 as you're starting out as level 1. And then we've filled out all of this stuff. Okay, the other block I wanted to point you to on the player character sheet is down here, other proficiencies and languages. So your race will give you a language, at least one, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that. But your background might also give you other languages, so you're going to want to put those down here. The background might also give you the other types of tools that you might be proficient in, so carpentry tools or brewer's tools, things like that. So you want to put that kind of stuff down here and the other proficiencies and languages block. So in the next episode, what we're really going to do is jump more into equipment, which is way down here, because equipment, depending on what you have, will tell us what your armor class is, what type of armor you're wearing. It dictates your armor class. It also tells us if you've got a sword, a short sword, longbow, crossbow, etc., what your attack bonus will be if you're proficient in that weapon. But it's going to be dependent upon the weapon. The damage that weapon will do is dependent upon the weapon. So when we talk about equipment in the next episode, we'll fill out the center section. The other big piece of this that sort of sits by itself is hit points. It's super important. It may deserve its own mini episode. I'm still sort of on the fence about that because it'll be super quick. Once I explain hit points, you'll be like, nothing to it. So anyways, that is the lesson on background, kind of filling out, describing your character, and really pulling a lot of that personality, a lot of that flavor into your player characters, so that when you're role playing at the table, you're playing, understanding what the ideal is, what the bond is, what are the flaws of this character, what's their background, who are they, why are they here? Think about it like acting. So there you have it. One last little detail, speed. It is a huge block on your player character sheet, but we kind of missed it so far. All you gotta do is look at your race, the racial traits of whatever character you're playing. In there, it'll say what the speed is. It's in feet. That's the amount of feet that this character can cover in an action. So just jot that down. Usually it's 30 feet, sometimes 25 feet. Anyways, just put that in there and you're good to go. All right, folks, one last reminder. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and please share it with your friends, particularly folks that are new to D&D. This may be the group that you play your first D&D campaign with. Thanks. See you next time.